in my 15 minutes is give you a bit of an overview of what's going on in the regulator these days, lots of change, but mainly to give you a report card on our responses to public concerns and industry activity in shale gas development, particularly in hydraulic fracturing, because we've been doing a lot of regulatory change in the last couple of years. So I'll give you a good snapshot of what's going on. I understand that the slide decks are available to everybody because there's a number of numbers, statistics, etc. And you might want to peruse them a little later, and you can catch me at the break, or at the end of my deck is the contact numbers if you want to follow up on anything or contact me directly. So how does this work? That it? Okay. Yeah, just a word from my sponsor, the Alberta Energy Regulator. We're a new beast. We're just a couple of months old, but really oil and gas regulation in Alberta is nothing new. The first regulator was created over 75 years ago. The ERCB celebrated 75 years in its existence before it was transformed into the Alberta Energy Regulator. And that mandate has expanded for energy regulation in all sorts of directions over the decades, in response to technology, the resource, and what the public wants, and more importantly, how government policy is being expressed for energy development, as we heard before. So again, right now we're a brand new regulator, Alberta Energy Regulator, AER. It's a new organization with a new mandate. And I won't read this, but basically it says we're still responsible for orderly, environmentally responsible development of hydrocarbons and bitumen and coal in Alberta, but we also have some new pieces that are given to us, and these are the allocation conservation of water, which we never had before as the ERCB, managing public lands, and also a lot more strength in environmental protection. So again, those are very different roles that are coming to the regulator from the government as part of this reorganization we're doing, and that's making it a very different dynamic. And that's starting to impact a lot of our work and how it touches individuals as well as industry. So what we regulate still is all the wells and pipelines that are within Alberta, gas processing plants, oil sands mines, etc., bitumen upgraders, and coal mines. So we're standing up this new regulator right now, and it's a phased approach. The proclamation of the act that created us was back last spring, and now we're going through a number of phases, bringing in these new functions from government agencies, especially ESRD, who will still remain the regulator for all the other sectors in the province. But right now, again, we're just getting through phase one, just as our launch, setting up the governance structure. Phase two, which is in late November, which brings in the public lands administration and geophysical seismic part of the Mine and Minerals Act. And then phase three is the Environmental Protection and Water Act, approvals, authorizations, compliance, etc. And that's in March of 2014. So it's still very much a work in progress, but still we are doing our job as a regulator. So now into my talk. I know a number of you were here last night hearing a number of speakers, including one of my colleagues, talking about Alberta's wealth of hydrocarbon resources. And I just want to remind everybody that we are a petroleum province. I'm from an energy regulator. I'm an energy geologist, but I just want to underscore that we have this enormous endowment of hydrocarbons here, and in conventional oil and gas pools alone, my branch looks after over 72,000 individual producing pools and deposits. That's not the number of wells, that's the number of deposits that have been discovered over the last 125 years in Alberta. And all this is just because we're blessed with this geology here that has produced hydrocarbons, migrated the hydrocarbons, and kept them in traps over long periods of time. So we're sitting on this wealth. And that's given us, again, this long legacy of petroleum production that we regulate over 100 years, like I said. Up to now, I got the current number, 410,355 wells have been drilled for oil and gas in Alberta, of which 181,000 are presently producing from those 72,000 pools. I'm not counting oil sands. And of those, because we're going to talk about fracturing, it's important to remember that over 171,000 of those wells have already been fractured. It's a conventional technology that's applied in different ways to shale gas. And since 2008, when this new technology started getting underway, there's been about 6,300 or so horizontal wells that have had multi-stage hydraulic fracturing, in addition to those historical 171,000. So we have a long legacy of this activity. So what's changing? What's changing is that technology, and there's a new prize in Alberta. And again, as David said, in my branch, we've done a lot of studies on trying to quantify what is this prize and why is it so important to Alberta. And these are big numbers, but basically we're talking shale gas. We've always known it was there. This is where the hydrocarbons are born. Some of it squeezed out and got into conventional traps, but a lot of it stayed behind. Most of it stayed behind. And that's what this technology lets us access. So our estimates of shale gas in place in just 8 of the 15 or so formations in Alberta that have this abundance of hydrocarbons in place have these enormous numbers, like 3,406 trillion cubic feet. That's a huge number. If 1/10 of that is recoverable, then we're looking at reserves that would equal what we've already produced or have found in conventional deposits. And that's not even counting what the liquids and the oil in place are. And remember, this is our resource, so we have to steward it and conserve it as well. So there's a lot of concerns around there, and just to dive into the report card part, the concerns we hear, and they come into the regulator as well as into other parts of the government, but it's our responsibility to react to these. They're really around 3 poles: water quality, water quantity, and formation integrity and well integrity. So the threats or the hazards perceived are, for water quality, is something getting into my water. We're talking about the protection of and having safe, secure water. So we're talking about the quality of water. People concerned of natural gas being released by fracking, chemicals that are stored or injected underground, and things that are stored at surface, saline water as well. In water quantity, these operations use a fair bit of water, depending on the technology, maybe up to 100,000 cubic meters per horizontal well. That's 3 kilometers long. So we're concerned about we hear concerns on source protection. We heard that already in the conversations with Alberta. Interference between wells or other supplies. And then we're going to hear today about concerns about the consumptive use of water. Water that goes underground doesn't come back. What's its value? And then formation integrity. Really, this is about micro-earthquakes. I'm going to talk about all of these. So the current state, and this is just a bit of an anecdotal update. What we hear is mostly concerns around groundwater and spills at surface on water quality. And we're also hear a lot of concerns about the presence of thermogenic gas or petroleum gases being released into water wells. And my unit actually does a lot of those investigations. On water quantity, there hasn't been any real evidence of shortages induced by the use of water, but we have a lot of concerns on the social side. Again, we'll hear more of that today. Should the water be used this way? These are policy questions. But up to now, we haven't seen any real quantity issues as a regulator. And then formation and water well integrity. There's a number of programs that look after the addressing of complaints on performance of water wells especially, or aquifer integrity, and how to repair wells if they presume to be damaged by oil and gas activity. Those things have been in place for decades. What people are concerned more about too is with fracking, is because it does crack the ground. There's the concern, are there earthquakes being caused by this? I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But up to now, we haven't seen really any damages. And just a bit of a highlight, we've been injecting water into this basin since the 40s and 50s, and we've known that there's small earthquakes with water injection. We've known that for 40, 50 years. And up to now, there's never been any damages from those very small earthquakes. But I'm going to tell you what we're doing about monitoring in the new industry at the end of my talk. So when it comes to doing regulation, it's all about responding to risk. This is what we heard as policy assurance. You as the people speak through your elected officials saying where you want to go. Plans are made, limits are set, thresholds are established in regional plans, and then assurance, policy assurance, that's our job, is to make sure that the industry stays within those ditches. And it's all about balancing outcomes and the risks to those outcomes. So there's a number of things on this slide that we have to consider in a regulatory framework, because regulation is costly, It's burdensome to everybody. It slows things down. So you have to make sure that you really have something that you have to offer in terms of putting a regulation in place. And all these things are very important, and this is what we try to do. So I won't talk to this. The new regulatory framework is all changing, but this is the law by which we do our work, and this comes from government. This is the acts of the legislature that create us and tell us what we can do and what we can't do. And then we are allowed to put regulations under those acts. And I just wanted to highlight, again, what they have to be is necessary, fair, transparent, and proportional to risk. That means we can't do a regulation if there's really no risk there. There may be another solution like Synergy in order to address some of the concerns. So regulation isn't always the answer. And again, we have a number of regulatory instruments. We've been doing this for 75 years. Rules that we put in place. And then we have mechanisms to enforce those rules: authorizations, inspections, audits, reports, investigations, enforcements, penalties, fines, etc. So AER, like its predecessor ERCB, is already well equipped to do a number of these activities for that policy assurance. So now I just want to switch into the actual what's going on in the regulatory scene on hydraulic fracturing and shale gas development. There's been a couple of significant things that we've done in the past year. And I just want to bring everybody up to speed. You may have heard about these, but if not, I'm happy to tell you about them. Our rules or regulations are usually bundled in things called directives, which are kind of handbooks of the rules around certain activities. So we have a new directive that came into force in the spring, called Directive 83. And this is our hydraulic fracturing directive. So this tells industry what they can do in terms of hydraulic fracturing and how we're going to regulate them. And it has a number of points that are specific to address risks to the outcomes for policy assurance. First of all, and I'm just going to step through these because they're important, we require notification. We always required reporting of fracturing. That's how we know that there was 171,000 fracturing events in wells historically. But now we require notification in advance, at least 5 days in advance. The companies have to notify AER's nearest field center that they're going to do a fracturing job. So we can go out and do inspection or just observation if we want to. That's new. For wellbore integrity, we actually have higher requirements in place for the wells themselves. They have to have what's called a dual containment system or dual barrier system. So the pipe that carries the frac fluids is inside another pipe. So that's a requirement that we put in. For inter-wellbore communication, we require reports of when there's a kick or there's a spill caused by a frac well coming out someplace else. So we require the report. We required that reporting before anyways, but now it comes into a different system. And in 2012, before the directive came into place, we were already collecting the statistics so we could see if there was a real risk. And just for statistics, and we haven't released these yet because it's still coming out, but last year there was 22 pressure pulses that were recorded by other companies on inter-wellbore communication. And there were 4 small spills and 3 what we call severe spills or flows to surface. So that told us in 2012 already that there was a risk and that this instrument actually was necessary. And as a result, the 2013 numbers we're still collecting are actually going down, which is a good thing. Then this also has specifics on non-saline aquifer protection. So we use setbacks to make sure that the operations are far enough away from aquifers, water wells, or the top of bedrock to make sure that the chance of connection of fracs with the aquifers is negligible or even zero. And again, there's more requirements about these setbacks. We also require, we were talking about fear of chemicals in the subsurface, and people demanded, they wanted to know what was going in the ground. And companies had already voluntarily reported it, and under some of our previous directives, we required it if you were fracking above the basic groundwater protection. But now we require reporting of all chemicals put in, and we use what's called frac focus, as many of you already know, in order to collect and publish that information. And to date, 2,281 wells have reported into frac focus, and whereas the companies have some ability, thank you, to screen some of the information that they put into frac focus. Under our requirements and our rules, we can get all the information on their chemistry if we need to. There's no trade secret protection of frac fluids in Alberta. And we also, because there's concerns over is the fracking operations, are they using a lot of water, and is that use intolerable? And we'll hear some opinions on that today. It's hard to judge that without information. So what we're requiring is we always required every operator to submit their water production, but now we're capturing where the water comes from in drilling and fracking operations. So up to now, over, I just got this, 1,565 operators have this year submitted information on where the water came from that they used in fracking. And we've got it down to 14 types, non-saline, saline, et cetera. So we're collecting this information to find out how much water is this industry really using? And then we can address that if there is a problem relative to the amount, or relative to the source, or relative to the area of the province. So this is all stuff that's in progress. Lastly, just talk about seismicity and hydraulic fracturing. People have a lot of concern all over the world about micro-earthquakes and fracturing activities. So we set up a monitoring network in 2005 in collaboration with the Universities of Calgary and Alberta and the Earthquakes Canada of the federal government to start monitoring on a regional basis small or micro-earthquakes in Alberta. And we've known, again, from Earthquakes Canada work that water injection wells can trigger small earthquakes. But we wanted to see what was going on in the fracturing aspect of things, so we needed a different network. So since we've been monitoring in 2005, we've recognized that there's a lot more micro-earthquakes naturally than we ever suspected. Number one, most, if not all of these, no one ever feels. That's number two. And to date, we've only got one instance where we could correlate it to a hydraulic fracturing activity, and nobody felt it. We just detected it. So of the 6,300 or so frac jobs that happened, we had monitored during that time since 2008. We've got one instance where there was a small earthquake that nobody felt. And this information is coming out in a report later this month from AER. So we are looking at these things and doing a lot of other investigations as well, looking at some of these knowledge gaps to make better regulation. And we do a lot of this with other government departments and universities. A lot of education, information things. So going forward, just to wrap up, as we heard as well, that we're looking at different ways of regulating this activity. Predominantly, or most importantly, is looking at plays. These are the big aerial views as opposed to facility views of activity. So we get a better handle on issues of water use, water protection, conservation, land use, et cetera, as AER. And what's the impact of new technologies? Looking more at cumulative effects management. Again, the ERCB in its history came from an era that was about pollution prevention and very site-specific activities to ensure public safety and orderly development and wise use of land and stopping proliferation of unnecessary facilities at surface. We're into a new era now, and we're concerned about long-term liabilities, cumulative effects, the integrated impact of all sectors on the landscape. So this is a new world, and AER is part of that. And then on things on water use, it's talking about more collaborative mechanisms for shared water systems. So each company isn't necessarily using the same water source independently. Maybe they can collaborate. And again, we already heard a lot more monitoring and a lot more consideration of reporting and evaluation of performance of the sectors in the industry against the outcomes set by government policy. That's a go-forward message. And again, we're not there yet. We're still setting up the AER. It's brand new, but this is where we're going. And this is in response to the policy direction, and in many cases driven by the water conversations and the government process. So we are reacting very positively to all these changes. So my time is up, and thanks very much, and stay tuned for more. Thanks.